Hi, I'm Michael Day, a teacher, nature photographer, and traveler. This video is about a trip to Churchill, Canada, and a grand opportunity to photograph polar bears in the wild. At the end of the video, there is some information about my blog and how to contact me. If you want to subscribe to other travels, just hit that little button in the right-hand corner. Thanks for watching. There's something about bears. I love spending time observing them in the wild. In part, that's why I'm attracted to both Grand Teton and Yellowstone National Parks, and the hope to encounter and photograph grizzly bears and black bears. Over the years, I've observed a lot of bears in both places. Glacier National Park too, mostly through a spotting scope, sometimes seeing them up close near a road, but still at a safe distance. Once I even encountered one of the most famous bears in Grand Teton National Park, Grizzly Bear 399, who recently in 2020 gave birth at age 24 to 4 cubs. I watched her with 3 cubs in May 2013. And once I flew to Katmai National Park in Alaska to spend a few hours, unfortunately in the rain, watching large brown bears fish for salmon. But I had never seen a polar bear in the wild. When I did want to see polar bears, Susan and I traveled 2 hours to the Denver Zoo. Susan and I are big Denver Zoo supporters, in part because modern zoos are many things, including protectors of endangered animals and conservers of their natural homes around the world. And they continue to provide opportunities for the public to encounter animals they have never seen before. As David Attenborough once said, "No one will protect what they don't care about. No one will care about what they have never experienced." The Denver Zoo gained national attention with regards to polar bears when Klondike and Snow, infant polar bear cubs, were born there in November 1994 and needed to be raised by zoo staff after their mother abandoned them. A decade later, another cute pair of twin cubs were born at the Denver Zoo, but this time to a 17-year-old bear named Voda, a very popular bear and a very good mother. The polar bear cubs' names were Coda and Nuka, and they became instant zoo celebrities. So an opportunity to photograph polar bears in the wild was too good to pass up. In fall of 2014, my friend Ed and I traveled with Natural Habitat Adventures to Churchill, Canada, to spend a few days in the land of polar bears. This was my second trip with Natural Habitat out of Boulder, Colorado, a wonderful adventure travel outfit or company that's been operating since 1985. My first adventure with them was a few years earlier to the Galapagos Islands. Our trip began with a short flight directly north from Denver, Colorado, to Winnipeg, Canada, 798 miles flying. Winnipeg is the capital and largest city in the Canadian province of Manitoba. We spent a few days exploring, highlighted by a visit to Manitoba Museum. Here we were reminded of the rich 300-year history of Hudson's Bay Company. especially its control of the fur trade in North America in the 17 and 18 and early 1800s. We also learned about the indigenous peoples of the North, including the Inuit. When I was in school, the Inuit were referred to as Eskimos, a term seldom used now. Globally, today's Inuit population is only about 150,000, with 65,000 living in Canada, mostly in Nunavut, the sparsely populated territory in northern Canada, mostly within the Arctic Circle. Some 25,000 Inuit live here, about 83% of the total Nunavut population. Many Inuit, who until fairly recently led a mostly self-sufficient nomadic life in extremely harsh environments, are now having to adjust to living year-round in permanent settlements, increasingly dependent on others for survival. After our brief visit to Winnipeg, we flew to Churchill, again located nearly directly north. The flight from Winnipeg to Churchill, a bit over 2 hours, some 624 miles. Churchill, also known as the polar bear capital of the world, is a small town of about 900 people, 2/3 indigenous, the rest non-native. 5% of the indigenous peoples there in Churchill are Inuit. The town is nestled along the shallow westerly side of Hudson Bay. Industry today remains primarily hunting, fishing, and trapping, as well as tourism. Except for a few summer months when temperatures average 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, the temperature is bitterly cold. During our early November visit in 2014, the average temperature was a cold, blustery 9 degrees Fahrenheit. The quickly changing fall weather of Churchill, from warm to cold, from water to ice, involves a waiting game for polar bears. Polar bears depend on the bay to freeze and the ice to harden, providing easier access to their primary source of food, seals. Today, roughly 30,000 polar bears remain in the wild. About about half living in the vicinity of Churchill. Churchill lies in the southern limit of where polar bears are able to live year-round. Generally, the ice throughout the Hudson Bay completely melts by early August and does not freeze again until early November. So for 3 to 4 months each year, polar bears must come ashore, can't hunt, and must live off the fat, so to speak. Throughout the fall, and especially just before the bay freezes, increasing numbers of bears move towards the coast. When we saw our first polar bears, the ice was just forming along the coastline, and generally, the bears were doing one of 3 things: resting, conserving energy known as walking hibernation, sniffing the air for changing signs of weather and clues as to the state of the hardening ice, and sparring on the part of young male bears, seemingly a form of play, but likely early indicators of future dominance, as well as practice for more serious physical bouts during mating seasons later in life. So, when Ed and I arrived in early November, a number of polar bears had already congregated along Churchill's coast within easy viewing access. We were lucky, because within a few weeks or even days, when the ice on the bay fully freezes, the polar bears will move away from shore onto the frozen bay, feed for the next 8 months, and for the most part, disappear. Generally, polar bears prefer to remain on the sea ice. From here they hunt their seals as well as walruses and small whales. Polar bears are the largest land carnivores in the world. An average adult male weighs 800 to 1,200 pounds and can exceed 1,400 pounds, reaching maximum size by age 8 to 10 and 8 to 8.5 feet in length. An average female is about half the size. Compared to Yellowstone grizzly bears, polar bears are nearly twice the size and 4 times the size of Yellowstone black bears. Although Alaskan Kodiak brown bears can weigh 500 to 900 pounds and stand 7 to 10 feet, nearly as large as polar bears. To access both the terrain and our polar bears, we traveled in custom-made polar rovers. The vehicles are especially designed to allow guests to comfortably and safely approach and photograph polar bears, either snug and warm from a window seat inside or standing on an open deck at the rear. We close this video with some polar bear photos and a little segment called Polar Bear Waltz. At the end of the video is a slide with my blog address where you can contact me. Do so if you've seen a photo you'd especially like and wish a copy or print, or if you'd like to further examine the link between adult education, wonder, curiosity, adventure, and travel. Happy travels.